Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This week's amazing guest, a bit like me, has been cancelled. A bit like me, has been thrown off Twitter. A bit like me, has been on GB News. But a bit like me, well, not like me, she's a woman. And we all know what a woman is these days, regardless of what the woke lunatics talk about. So allow me to welcome Abi Roberts to Nick Talks.
Hi, Nick. So nice to. It's me, Abi Roberts. I am indeed a woman. Yes, a biological woman.
Yeah, let's not get into what a woman is because I tell you what, it drives me mental. We all know what a woman is. What I'd like to say, obviously, I've done a little bit. I've known you for a year and a half. Done a little bit of reading about you the last few days, and what surprised me is you're not the typical dumb blonde. You've been to university, which means absolutely nothing these days because you could have done lesbian dance theory. But at university, you did Russian and Italian, which is a proper degree.
It's actually a proper degree. I had to do some proper reading. I had a bit of a head start with Russian because I went there as a kid because my dad was a spy, sorry, a diplomat. So so I went to the but quite young, sort of in the mid 80s, and then went back to Russia in the early 90s to study. So I'd already started learning Russian, and so when I got to university, I was it was really to do with the literature and everything else, you know what I mean, and getting a degree. Although I have to say I didn't do a lot of work.
Well, what really impressed me is you're the only British comedian to go to Russia and do a comedy gig in Russian to the Russians.
That's correct. I did. I beat Eddie Izzard, and we all know Eddie Izzard's a real woman. But I've not only beat him as a biological woman, but also because he wanted to do comedy in Russian, and I did that back in 2006. So I did part. It was weird because the audience were partly English and Russian. I had to do it in what I call Ringlish, which is like a mixture of Russian and English. But it was such good fun. I did three nights, sold out. Honestly, the best. Even though I was followed to the venue, I had definitely followed there because they were like, "What's this person doing? Comedy, female comedian. What is going on? Что происходит?" And so it was yeah, it was a great time though. Very fun.
No, excellent. I went to Moscow in 1984. It was a school trip, so I would have been about 15, I think. Height of communism. Brezhnev was the president at the time, and that was a real experience at 15.
Yes, and when I went, I was a little bit younger, but I just remember first time I was in Moscow because my dad, I mean, he went with Margaret Thatcher to Moscow and Harold Wilson, so he was at that level of sort of going and translating and just sort of being the Russian expert, if you will. But I remember me and my sister were in a hotel room, one of the big hotel rooms, and because we'd seen all the James Bond films, where they look for bugs in the in the lampshade, I was up on the bed going testing 1 2 1, and a woman came in to clean the room. They called the dejurная, and they were on every floor. Just basically, they were spies for the government. They were just there behind a desk. She came in and just looked at me, and I was like, I'm just seeing whether the light works. And of course, she knew what I was on, and she could probably hear me going testing from her desk. So there was all that. There was all the spying going on, and I remember not selling, but I gave away blue eyeliner because of the Princess Diana craze in Russia at the time. I had blue eyeliner, and they were just like, "Oh my blue, this is amazing!" So I gave like a few people some eyeliners, some women.
I got a train. I got a train from Budapest to Moscow, obviously a school trip, and on the train, I sold my Adam and the Ants T-shirt, which cost me £2. Cost me £2 from Butlins. It had my name on the back, big picture of Adam Ant, and on the back it said Nick. And I sold that on the train going to Moscow. I actually took it off and sold it for some silly sort of money. I mean, for a 15-year-old kid, it cost £2. I think I got, if my memory serves me right, I think I sold it for like £14.
14. Oh my God. So capitalism, you were basically introducing them to early capitalism, even back then. They were like, and yeah, but it was, I have to say, my memories are, especially as obviously as I got older, of being there were just the when I was there in the early 90s, there was a food shortage. There were, but I remember the family I was living with, and they weren't particularly wealthy, but they were just there was always food. They made sure, and they were just beyond generous, incredible people. The Russians, not obviously so much the government, but and I've been pilloried, I've been vilified by people for disagreeing with what's happening, ramping up this war, and I've been called a Putin shagger, whatever, apologist. And it's like, no, 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 I'm not. I'm really not. I just know, I just know what I'm talking about, and we shouldn't be prodding the hornet's nest.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been all over the world. I've been to I don't know how many countries. I've backpacked around the world a couple of times, and every country I go to, the people are lovely.
Yes,
In
yes.
general, people all over the world are just nice people.
Are just nice people, yeah. And the Russian culture in particular, they have some of the greatest literature, music, art, history. I mean, the history Russian. I remember when I was learning it, I was like, oh my god, this is an embarrassment of riches. Because you think of, and actually it's interesting because people always think of blaming the Russians for socialism and what we've got now. Actually, the French are very much to blame, and the Americans. Those two, the French, the early sort of the intellectuals with their sort of like what we're seeing now, basically, sort of communitarianism. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of sort of going on.
And I think our stance on Russia comes from they've been one of our oldest, biggest enemies, going back hundreds of years. And that's something that's in our psyche. So we always look at the Great Bear and go, enemy, like we do with the French. The French is the biggest enemy because we've been fighting them for 1,000 years. So
Yes,
all that is ingrained in our culture.
Although the Russians came in very handy, I seem to remember during the Second World War, and came to our aid. I mean, the Russians were, lost an awful lot of men during this, as we know. So sort of I sometimes want, and also I don't know what your thought is, Nick, but my belief is that the Cold War never really ended. It's sort of has been deliberately put there for various people's interests, which is that let's keep Russia sort of at a distance, all there. But actually, Russians are very, very, because the eagle looks east and west. They are, if anything, very European, and I don't mean that in the EU sense. I mean that in the good sense that we share a lot culturally with the Russians. And people don't always remember that.
Yeah, well, we always need an enemy. It's one of the ways how you control the population. Every dictator does it. Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi. Everybody needs an enemy because if you want your people looking out, because there's nothing to look out at. They look in, which means they look at you, and you don't last much longer.
Yeah, exactly. And we're all, as we're seeing at the moment, yeah, I mean, just I mean, it does worry me, the ramping up of this of the war. I remember somebody on Question Time saying, I think it was Konstantin actually, weird, because I thought, I mean, he's great. I do like Konstantin Kisin, but he said that he compared, which I thought was slightly unwise, Putin to Hitler, because he thought that Putin's aim was to go into Eastern Europe, was actually to go further and to go into Poland and Czechoslovakia. And I can say categorically, even though I obviously haven't had any conversations with Putin, that's not his aim. That's not his aim. It's to keep basically the Americans and UN away from the Russian border, essentially. But whatever you think of Putin, he's bad. He's not mad, he's bad, as David Starkey says.
Yeah, there's a difference. Right, let's get into some questions. My first question to you is, you share a similar experience with me. I got cancelled for saying what was on my mind, and so did you. Tell me a little bit about your cancellation.
Okay, Nick, my cancellation it came in 2020. So do you remember J.K. Rowling put out an article where she was basically saying we've defending biological sex, that there are women and there are two genders, and basically sort of she was basically concerned about trans activism and all the rest of it. Anyway, so I having not been on Twitter that much for various reasons, because I lost my husband at the end of 2018 and I hadn't really been doing much, I sort of went, oh, and obviously we had the beginning of the COVID nonsense. Then I tweeted my support for J.K. Rowling, and that afternoon I got a phone call from my agent. I missed the call. Then I rang back, never got an answer, and then never heard from them again.
That afternoon, so within a couple of hours.
A couple of hours of tweeting this, my agent had, as a lot of showbiz, as you know, a lot of people in the arts are so ingrained in this woke Maoist nonsense, this ideology, that they were sort of, it's like they were sort of primed to go, oh, who's, oh no, Abi said something. I have to say, Nick, I also was very critical of BLM on I mean, so it was the double whammy. It was J.K. Rowling calling BLM a Marxist organisation who would be dangerous to black people first and foremost, and would not be good news for them. And of course, I was called all sorts on Facebook. I was vilified. I was, even when I quoted Martin Luther King, one of his great speeches he did at Philadelphia School, which is, I think it's called "What is the Blueprint for Your Life?" One of his lesser known speeches. Honestly, people were saying to me, "But Martin Luther King isn't relevant anymore." I was like, "Sorry, have I just landed in cloud cuckoo land?" So that was me. It was over.
For BLM, he isn't relevant because he would not have supported BLM.
No, no way.
We know what he wanted. He wanted a fair world. He didn't want black power to rise to replace white power, or black nationalism to replace white nationalism. He didn't want one type of evil to replace another type of evil, because what he left with, you're still left with evil. He wanted, and he was a preacher. But again, all these new organizations have nothing in common with the heroes of the past, such as Gandhi. Gandhi is vilified now as a racist, as this, as that. So is Martin Luther King. And that should tell us a lot about these new organisations. Hence, I mean, it was only a few years ago Winston Churchill was named the greatest Briton ever. He's now classed as racist and evil. It's like, how far have we fallen?
Yes, exactly. How far have we fallen? That, I mean, I was, the marches that happened in 2021, well, end of 2020 and 21, against all the lockdowns, all the rest of it, and the awful misery that they've criminality, in my view. I saw the police standing around Winston Churchill and sort of protecting him. And I remember doing a little video and saying, "Look, this man pushed out fascism. So all this curtailment of our civil liberties." And obviously, things like, when BLM actually back in 2021, they were defacing monuments. So that form of fascism, we're experiencing it again in many forms. Fascism / communism, whatever you want to call it. I'm pushing it back, and I just remember thinking, this is so weird that I'm having to restate Winston Churchill's position. It felt very odd, like we've fallen, exactly like you said. How far have we fallen?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these organisations, well, they can today, but 2 years ago they could not have been criticised. Again, as you know, my story, sacked from the charity I founded for basically saying what BLM had put on their website. I was called a Nazi, a racist. Same thing happened to you, and I didn't get into the trans thing at that point. I was just, because BLM were trying to destroy the family, and I've spent 20 years trying to get more men to take responsibility of their children and be in the home and be fathers. That's why I spoke out, because that was directly ruining all the work I'd been doing for 20 years. And I thought people need to know about this. And that's why I spoke up. I didn't expect to be cancelled. I thought I was untouchable. I didn't even expect a storm. I expected some nasty tweets, but who cares? But I did not see my cancellation coming, because if I did, would I have pressed that enter button on the keyboard? And even today, I don't know if I'd have done it, because it changed my life completely. I'm glad I did it. I'm happy I did it. But if I'd have known then, would I have done it? And I really don't know, because am I that brave? So the question to you is, would you still have sent that tweet out in support of what J.K. Rowling wrote, with everything that's happened in the last 2 years?
I think yes, I would. I was thinking this about myself recently. Is I think I've always been not. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you look back and you think it's hindsight's 2020 vision, isn't it? I think the stakes are so high with what's going on that it's absolutely worth pulling the pin out of a grenade and throwing it, because we've got too much to lose. We've got too much to lose. So I think
almost every week now it comes out that we're being proven right now. Almost every BLM now are discredited. It was a scam. The frauds, the criminals. You know, you look at the chapters in America. Some have been arrested for paedophilia, for fraud, for gang violence, for murder, for rape, drug smuggling. You look at the three leaders, multimillionaires buying mansions, tens of millions of dollars missing. So they're discredited. And you look at the trans movement now. Mermaids have done us all a favour by taking the LGB to court, the LBG Alliance to court, because that allowed everybody else then to look at mermaids, and you see what's coming out of there, and it's like, they're done as a charity. They just don't know they're done, but they're done.
Yes, thank God. Mermaid. I mean, it almost, there's so much that I'm putting fires out every day, as I'm sure you are. Various things, like, you know, with it just seems like authoritarianism of the, and I've always been of the view that it's leftist. It's very definitely from the left. This seemingly, you know, oh, let's everyone get on together, and let's all kind of this this sort of everyone sort of under the same umbrella. This I call it communitarianism. You know, where everyone's just like herded into these, one size fits all, and the mermaids are they should all be arrested. The people that run that charity, and Peter Tatchell, people like him, are dangerous men. They're dangerous because they are saying, you've heard him, like, I'm sure, a few times saying, oh, but children should be, it's the right thing to do for them to be able to choose to basically at an age where they have no idea about what their what's the word, their preference might be, their sexuality, to have puberty blockers, chest binding. Well, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgraceful. And children are being thrown under the bus every day. Doing this.
Completely agree. A compassionate society protects the vulnerable. Children are vulnerable just by the fact that they're called children. That's why we have adults. That's why we have, safeguarding officers, because children, and we do not trust children to make sensible decisions. That's why they can't smoke or drink until they're 18. That's why we don't allow them to vote, but we allow them to make these life-changing decisions on the whim because it's fashionable, and we call that compassion. It's not compassion. It's child abuse.
It is, absolutely 100% agree. And if I hear Peter effing Tatchell say once more, oh, but it is reversible. I mean, the evil is beyond comprehension. That this, you remember women and children first. Remember that old saying, like on Titanic, on the ships, that was the duty of men to protect women and children. And people like Peter Tatchell, I'm afraid, they're fueling child abuse. What's going on?
I'm glad you've said women and children first, because what most people don't understand is it was the men who shouted that. It wasn't the women and the children.
Yes,
the men
correct.
would shout women and children first, and they would hold other men back, because as a man, one of our duties is to protect the tribe and protect our family. We risk our lives every day to make sure society is safe for women and children. And the reason why we've got this nonsense today is because we've got a deficit of real English men now, because we've over-feminized them, and we've turned them into inferior versions of women. And who wants to be an inferior version of anything? If we had real men like we did 50 years ago, We wouldn't have the grooming gang scandal because English men would have sorted those perverts out. We wouldn't have men going into women's changing rooms and into toilets because real men would have sorted that out. And all we've got now is soy drinking men going, oh, just be kind and be compassionate. But do you know what? When the evil horde come to the gate and all we've got is weak men, believe me, the biggest victims of that, the people who'll be raped and murdered will be the women and the children.
Yes.
That's who will suffer when you only have weak men. And we need to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. What we've seen happen over the last 20 plus years, and, you know, with successive, I have to say, the so-called conservatives haven't done anything about it either. They've just sat, you know, twiddling their thumbs, is just with Tony Blair was really when the gates opened, the floodgates opened, he let everyone in so he could get the votes. And what we're seeing now with multiculturalism is the subjugation of our morals, of our values, of our, exactly like you said, the the ability for people to stand up and say, no, this isn't going to happen in our country. And why? This is the weird thing. Why would anyone want it to happen? Surely the left, must be the progressive left, want to preserve their country, don't they? And their families, and it's so weird.
You would think they would because of all the benefits they get. And I don't even put the blame at the feet of Tony Blair. I think Tony Blair just took it to the next step. This has been going on since post-World War II.
Right.
This has been a very slow process. But certain points it's been ramped up, and Tony Blair ramped it up. But I wouldn't, I don't like Tony Blair, but I wouldn't put all the blame.
Wouldn't put all the Maybe you're right that it was almost like the it sort of sped up with him. But you're right that I think, and it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's again, as you get older, your perspective change. But the 60s, the sort of progressiveness, the let's just all let everything hang out, and feminism. Actually, weirdly,
let's have feminism because feminism would be wonderful for women. And all the reports now actually say from the 50s to today, women's happiness is declining every decade. They get more freedom, more financial responsibility, everything they think they want, and their happiness is going down and down and down. Men's is staying the same, by the way. Women's is going down because it's the Midas touch. What you think will make you happy doesn't always make you happy. It can kill you. And feminism is killing women.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
So, Abi, with you on my podcast, it'd be rude not to talk about comedy and the whole scene behind that. How is the scene of comedy? How woke is it? What problems do you face? And is it as bad as we all think?
Well, Nick, good grief. What can I say? Comedy has been sliding slowly downhill for the past, I'd say, 15 or so years, gradually being eroded. So that people, it's just become a sort of morass of wokeness, of groupthink, of you can't say that. Oh, did you just say that? Self-editing. People sort of, I can see comedians who maybe might have been a bit braver 5 years ago going, should I? Oh, no, maybe not, because they've got other comedians in the green room sort of with their beady eyes, their awful Maoist beady eyes on them. So I hate what's happened to comedy. I am somebody who proudly has not capitulated in any way, shape or form. In fact, I've gone the other way. Because people need to laugh. It's a way of just releasing tension, laughing at society, laughing at yourself, and there's always going to be, I'm the butt of many of my jokes, but I also say that, we've got to joke about everything, because you can't have little sections which are sort of like, well, yeah, but just don't joke about that, because then, as we see, where does it end? It ends with people like Jerry Sadowitz, great comic, who was banned, had his show pulled from Edinburgh. And you know what? None of the comedians, I think there was maybe one or two comedians, myself included, petitioned, said we want him back. But the Pleasants didn't listen.
That's because most comedians were scared and are saying, I don't want, because most people are cowards. History teaches us that. And nobody wanted to put their head above the parapet to help him, because it's like, oh, they may then shoot my head off. And the strangest thing about cancelling his show was, from what I've seen on TV, was nobody in the audience complained. It was a staff who worked in the theatre.
Yeah.
They were the complainants.
Yeah. The little whingy woke tards that were like, excuse me, but there's somebody, or excuse me, but we don't agree with Mr. Sadowitz as being rude. It's like, do you know anything about Jerry bloody Sadowitz? For Christ's sake, why did they have him? Why did they book him? They know he's deliberately provocative, and like he does, really pushes the envelope. But that for me was one of the we're in serious trouble. But like you said, Nick, they're all bloody. But it's so short term. It's such short term thinking. Do these people not realise that they're contributing to the end of comedy by not saying something?
They don't think that far ahead, and if they do, their cowardice takes over and makes them want to be on the side that seems to be winning. I mean, comedy is very powerful. The reason why people go after comedians is because comedians have a really good knack of attacking the powerful and taking the mickey out of the powerful. And powerful people or powerful groups don't like that because it's an attack. It's an attack you can get away with. So let's shut the comedians up first. And a great example of that would be, a quick question, who do we all think is the most evil man in the world in the last 70, 80 years?
The most evil man in the world.
Universally accepted. Had a little moustache.
Oh yeah, okay, Hitler. Yeah.
And what do we all do about Hitler? Yeah. Most people tell jokes about Hitler. Hitler's the butt of many, many jokes, and he was the most vile, evil man in the last 100 years. And we even now, we take him down a notch by making jokes about him. That's how powerful comedy is. And as a personal story for me, I used to stutter as a kid. So up to about 13, I used to have a bad stutter. And it was, let me just get this off my screen. There we go. And so in school, it would be if I had a reading class. And I was the butt of many, many jokes. Kids in my class made a joke up about me. And it was Nick, in Nick's house in the morning. Nick's mum shouts upstairs, Nick, what do you want for breakfast? And Nick shouts down, I'll have some and Nick's mum shouts upstairs, Nick, what do you want for lunch? I laughed at that. And
I like that, that's good.
And I had to laugh at stuttering because if I didn't laugh, it gave the people bullying me or taking the mick out of me more power. And I became the first person who would laugh at my stuttering. I would tell jokes about my stuttering. And you could see people then going, I've got nothing to say now to take the mickey out of Nick. I took the power away from them. And again, and that's what people don't like about comedians, especially when you take the mickey out yourself. It's like, well, if you're doing it, how can I attack you? Because you don't seem to care. Comedians are like the canary in a coal mine of society. Once you start going after the comedians, everybody else is fair game.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the court of the king, the jester is the only one who's able to tell the truth. So when the king says to the jester, yeah, mate, sorry, can you shut up now? You're in trouble. Because then you realise that, oh my God, then anyone could be targeted, for their for what they say. But I mean, I remember being on GB News. Must have been last year, and there was some we were some debate about comedy, and this comedian that was on, so in the debate, this woke comedian said that I should only do comedy that was based on. I can only do comedy based on my own lived experience, So I said, well, in which case I can't joke about Matt Hancock because I haven't been Minister for Health. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, everything you should, in my view, you should be able to punch up, sideways, downwards. There should be nothing off limits for comedy.
And if I don't like your style of comedy,
yeah,
I'm free not to buy a ticket and attend.
Yes. Freedom of choice. Remember that, everybody? Absolutely madness. You just reminded me, actually. I had a therapist this was years ago. I had a therapist once who had a very bad stammer. That was quite. I have to say they were quite long sessions. So I shouldn't laugh at it, but they were quite, especially when there were issues.
Having a stutter
Yes.
is funny to everybody
Yeah.
else. I understand
Yeah.
it's funny. Of course it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
she was a lovely woman, actually. Lovely woman.
And growing up through my primary school, one of the main TV shows in the country was Open All Hours. And do you remember Granville? Granville? So even one of our famous comedian actors put on a stutter. And did I ever find that offensive? I used to laugh at it because it's funny.
Yes, you have to laugh at life, the absurdity of it, because otherwise there's no meaning in life. You know, like I'm a big Roger Scruton fan, and I always, when my husband passed away, I listened to him a lot, and one of his things was find meaning. Anything, it can be anything at all. And if we don't have that in life, it's a very, very dark place. If you just go, well, then there's nothing. What's the point? You know, whatever it may be. So yeah, I totally agree that it's just making, it's just making the time we have on this planet mean something.
Yeah, and you have an affliction like that, and you can laugh at yourself. It toughens you up inside. A lot of these people who are woke and offended is because they've never had anything, nothing to ever overcome. Life has been so easy for them for so long. When they hear a joke that offends them, it's like, Jesus Christ, like that's that. It's like, well, if you've ever been beaten up by a gang of 8 lads, or you've had a gun pointed in your face, or you've been, all these terrible things that can happen to you. Well, when you hear some naughty words, it's like, they're naughty words. I don't have to go to A&E.
Yeah.
It toughens you up.
Yes, of course it does. And just words is, sticks and stones may break my bones, that old thing. Words will never hurt me. And it's so true. They just have no, and I kind of blame the parents, a lot of parents, because there's been a lot of that, hasn't there, where they've just gone. I tell you what, the thing that used to really annoy me was when it started coming out, when a parent would say about their child, oh yeah, we're best friends. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're their parent. You're there to look out for them, teach them resilience, wisdom, pass down wisdom, hopefully, and then set them off into the world. And they'll obviously be there as a sounding board. But this thing about, oh, we're best friends. Well, how does that work?
That 20 years I've spent working on the streets, mainly with kids, trying to stop them getting involved in crime and antisocial behaviour. Kids don't need any more friends. Kids need a parent. They need someone who's going to guide them, because they've got enough friends. And parents who do that are failing parents, because that's not your job, is to be their friend. Your job there is to make sure their future is successful.
Yes, exactly. And also to teach boundaries. The idea that, I was thinking this the other day, that a person needs boundaries, just like a country needs boundaries. That we have borders as our individuals, and we should have borders as countries, and then we wouldn't be in such shit as we are in the moment.
Yeah, boundaries and borders and social norms and tradition allow us to live our lives without constantly having to question what we're doing, why we're doing it, can we do it, is this going to result in violence, is this going to result in an argument? Because if you live your life like that, it's a very stressful life. When we have traditions and norms and rules, you know the rules of the game, so you then can enjoy playing the game knowing, I can't do this, I can do that. When it's a free-for-all, you're basically looking at Mogadishu, where anything goes, and it always leads to violence, and it's very stressful. But going back to comedy, I started seeing the destruction of comedy from the early 80s. And that happened with political correctness. Political correctness was the seed of wokeness. So when we started saying things like, oh, Bernard Manning is a racist, he can't be on TV anymore now. Jim Davison, he's a racist, his jokes aren't funny and they're always picking on people. They were the first signs of what was coming down the line. And the BBC stopped running some of those programs. They couldn't get on TV, they got cancelled. And that was the beginning of it all. Now, I'm not saying those comedians were funny. I do think they were funny. But I'm not saying that's not the point. The point is we produce or we air comedians, then the general public decide who they want to watch. And if Brendan Manning gets no ratings, well, he shouldn't be on TV. But he was getting ratings. It was all political correctness, and that's where this began.
Yes, I agree. And actually, interestingly, political correctness is a Soviet term. Yeah, which is fascinating that it was to do with the things you were allowed to say, as in because it was correct, the party approved, and then now it's become something that a sort of similar thing. So there is there's creeping socialist, leftist collectivization of thought, which is absolutely contrary to what liberal means, to what I think liberal means.
A liberal now means something completely different.
Exactly, yeah. So so to me, anyone that is on board with the woke stuff is by definition approves of authoritarianism, and they need to be told that. And I've lost comedian friends, people that I stopped being booked in 2020. Because when the people went after me, actually a lot of comedians from Manchester, funny enough, went after me with the trans stuff and the BLM stuff. And then I saw on Twitter clubs unfollowing me because it was like, oh, Abi Roberts she's one of them.
Yeah,
it's like,
persona non grata.
Yeah, exactly, persona non grata. When actually, as we see, fast forward 2 years, I'm somebody, I'm proud to say, who is at the forefront of pushing back so that we have more freedom. More freedom, not less. We need more of it, more free speech. Let's just everywhere just go, yeah, you can say what you want. Unless you're inciting, unless you're actually saying, go and kill those people, like the American Constitution, where it's very clear, then to me, it's like everything's fair game.
I completely agree. This is a good segue. Let's get in. My final question is about communism.
Okay.
A lot of this, for me, is the smell of communism, is the smell of Soviet Russia, Maoist China, North Korea, where not only do we not want to hear your view, but we're going to give you your view.
Yes, exactly. Prescribed political views. And you're absolutely right. Soviet, Maoist, a bit later on in the 60s, the French, Marcuse, all those intellectuals that Roger Scruton used to talk about, where it's basically out of the same playbook, which is the collectivization of thought, communitarianism, if you want to talk about it in Blairite terms, which is sort of cuddly communism. It really is cuddly communism, the Obama type way of thinking, and globalization. And this is, we're seeing it repackaged because for some reason human beings cannot, I said this to someone the other day on a podcast, they cannot look back at history and go, what could possibly go wrong? Well, you've got, bloody Soviet Russia, for Christ's sake, Stalin, responsible for 40 million, part even higher deaths. Stalin alone, let alone Hitler. So add Hitler and Stalin. So all part of that. Let's collectivize, put people into groups. Homogenize. Think of human beings as numbers, and it never ends well because you're an individual under God. You're an individual, and no man can take your freedoms away. That's my philosophy.
Yeah, I've given this quite a bit of thought, and I wrote about it in one of my books. The reason why socialism and communism won't die as an idea.
Yeah, tell me.
My thought really is, we've been designed to live in small tribes with an all-powerful tribal leader, where we will share everything: the hunt, the kill. We will share resources because everyone's related to each other. Everyone's cousins and brothers and sisters, and we will look after each other. And that works on a micro scale, 100 people living in a small tribe. And, 10,000 years ago, when tribes got too big, they would split into two tribes. Because what would happen is when tribes got too big, people were removed from the center where the power was. So, within 100 people, the leader of the tribe would know your name. When it gets to 500 people, the leader of the tribe would not know you anymore now. So they would split. So I think this is in our DNA. But when we ramp it up to a macro level, where it's a nation, it just doesn't work. But deep down inside our DNA is saying, this is how we should be living. But our DNA is wrong at such a large scale. And that's why it won't die as an idea.
As an idea. Yeah, that is a good point. And I was thinking, what's interesting is that the idea of trading between tribes is something which is what I think is why capitalism works. I mean, I'm talking about free market now, not corporate capitalism. Is the idea that if I have something that you want to buy, like you found with your Adam and the Ant t-shirt, that you can trade with somebody as an individual. So there'll always be, to me, that is why we must keep the free market as much as possible, because to me, that's the essence of being an individual, is being able to say, well, I've got this, what have you got over there? Or should we do some business? But I agree that the tribal it's an interesting thing, that idea of, just large numbers of people, and the fact that we all, of course, are, if the Good Samaritan, none of us want to cross over to the other side of the road when we see someone in trouble, and that's a good thing to have. That's a good instinct, to have compassion. But it's also, you need to look after your own resources so you're able to cross the road, to be the Good Samaritan. There's no good like having nothing, and then when somebody's lying in the ditch going, well, I haven't got anything because I've given it all away. Oh, so how am I to help people? So that idea, I very much agree with. We have to put our own oxygen mask on first before we help somebody else.
Yeah, and for me, that's a type of personal responsibility.
Yes,
I need to look after me and my own first, and then I will look after my community, then I will look after my nation, and then I will look after my planet. That's the order. There's a famous, I think it's a Middle Eastern saying that says, me, my brother against my cousin, me, my cousin against the world.
Yes.
Which means I have a priority about who I protect first.
Absolutely. I can't remember, again, along a similar vein, I think somebody this is ages ago on Twitter, put it in the order of like God, family, friends, home, so country. So in that, and if you think of that as like your little, almost like it's not so you're so rigid that everything is like, because obviously in life we know that's not entirely possible. But as long as we're aiming for that little thing in the back of our heads where we go, okay, that will help us, But you're right, the structure's gone totally.
That list you just gave out then is the reason why they're always wanting to destroy the family.
Yes, absolutely. The Marxists want to destroy the family because to them it's, well, and also they wanted to destroy God, let's be honest. I mean,
they've already done that.
Yeah, they've already done that, exactly. So once you do that, we see where it ends. You're exactly right, where, then the family's splintered. People, do you know something? And I'm sure, and I know you've spoken about this before, when people, when I was a kid and I used to sit around the table with my parents, me and my sister would be with my parents, maybe with another relative or friends, we were always at the dinner table, whether it was mostly dinner, to be honest, because my parents were out at work and then we didn't really see them at breakfast, but dinner time. And that's where you exchange ideas, isn't it? That's where you all say, how's your day been? Oh, are you doing okay at school? Oh, blah, blah. And that is a crime that now even friends of mine who I thought were fairly thought the way along our lines, I get sad when I think, well, but you're not using your dining table as, why is it there? You're not sitting down and going, right, we're going to sit down, have some, talk about the world and ideas. And that I think is a big thing that's happened. And
it's those conversations over time is when, as a parent, you realise your daughter's extremely unhappy, or your son has gender issues, so they don't feel alone, and looking online, You're discussing it around the table over months and months and months because, you're saying to your daughter, why are you so sad all the time? And she then doesn't have to resort to cutting because she's got her parents to speak to. And that's why we're missing all these problems. Parents are missing all these problems because we're not talking to our children. What we think helps them is, I'll buy you the new iPhone. Aren't I a good parent? Well, out of all the kids I've worked with who have been abused, the thing they tell you most of all they want is a hug.
Yes.
I worked with a
so
12-year-old girl in North Manchester who at 12 had 7 sexual boyfriends. All
At
16
12?
at 12. She ended up with she complained there was something wrong with her. We took her to A&E and she had gonorrhea at 12.
Oh my God.
When we were talking to her, social services got involved and all that sort of stuff. We're not there to fix those problems. There's professionals to do that. But when we was talking to her and find out why she did what she did, she was basically saying, I just wanted to be loved. I wanted someone to love me. And I've learned off my mum that the way you get men to love you is you give them sex. And she learned that at 12 and was sexually active. And she looked 12.
Jesus.
And one of the
sad.
local boys in the area told us, all you've got to do with her is tell her you love her and you can do anything you want to her.
Oh my
How
God.
sad is that? Because
very
poor
sad.
parenting, no father in the home, mum, constant boyfriends, every month a new boyfriend. She knows to give him sex. That's how she gets her boyfriend. And we're failing our own children.
Yes, definitely. And failing, and as Jordan Peterson quite rightly says, failing a generation of young men as well, who, like you said, who don't have the father figure, the role model to say, this is how you respect a woman, respect girls. And it's just, it is very sad. And I hear your point that it goes way back, to the progressiveness of the 60s, when it was all like peace and love and harmony and all the rest of it, which obviously has its plus points, the peace idea, but that it's sort of shrugging off the fact that having structure in the home, which then is actually doing a disservice to children, isn't it? Because you're kind of going, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether we sit down at the dining table or, you just go and do what you want. And then, of course, children, that's the awful thing, is that then they have nobody to, as you said, to hug them, to look after them, which is tragic, absolutely tragic.
And that's what tradition is all about. Tradition, I don't know who said this. It wasn't me, by the way. So I read this somewhere. Tradition is the solution to problems we forgot we had. And then we break that tradition, we get rid of that tradition, and we go, oh, look at all these problems. Well, that's what that tradition was solving from hundreds and thousands of years ago. Why do we think every culture, civilization, tribe, every single one of them has always valued the family structure? It's because they've all learned over millennia it's the most productive way to raise children and to live. And all of a sudden, in our day and age now, we're going, we know better. We have 19-year-old blue-haired university students going, I know better than all those amazing people who went before me. I know how to run this world. I know we need to do this. I know we need to do that because I know everything. It's like, you know nothing. These people 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, were not animals. They were just as smart as we are now. They just didn't have iPhones. And some of them were amazing people. And we're nothing compared to the people we remember from the past. We're nobodies.
Yes, I agree. And I was thinking, I was in Westminster Cathedral the other day, you know, the one in near Victoria in London. And I go in there because I live quite close. I go in there sometimes just to sit, you know, just in silence and just have a little thought to myself. Even though I'm actually Russian Orthodox, but anyway, don't tell the Catholics. And it's lovely because it's peaceful. And I looked up and I thought, would we build this now? Who would do it? Who would take the time to make it so beautiful? And the answer is, sadly, I don't think we would. I don't think we would do it, even though they didn't have any of the technology that we do now back then.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. Forget, would we build it? The question is, could we build it?
Yes. Could we? Yeah.
How would we
absolutely.
design it on paper? How can you tell bricklayers what to do without a computer screen? How can you order it? I don't think we could do it without our modern technology.
No, I think you're right. And that another saying, which I love, and I said this on Neil Oliver when I was with him earlier this year, and I said, progress is 50 steps forward and 100 steps back. And that's what we're seeing, is the fact that we go, oh, look, we're so advanced and everything. Are we? Are we? Have we, like you said, have we forgotten our what beauty is, as Scruton said, beauty, truth, goodness, morality, ethics. Those are the things that are far more important than an iPhone or a Mac or, big pharma. Those things we are priceless, actually.
And I think because we've had the last 3-4 generations of people growing up in the West who have always seen their lives improve, it's now become an urban myth that life's always like this. Life always gets better. We seem to forget about the dark ages in Europe. We seem to forget that, the Arabs were the center of knowledge for 500 years, then the Greeks. And we don't look at Greece now and think center of knowledge. We don't look at Arabia and think the center of knowledge. We look now and go, they're slightly backwards, because civilizations grow and civilizations fall. And I don't know if we're about to fall or we're on our decline. Nobody ever knows. This could be a blip in our history, and it only seems bad because we're living through it. But I don't know if we're on the decline or not overall. But you know what? Time will tell, and that's all we can do. Me and you need to do our bit, which we're doing. So when the history books are wrote, nobody will be saying, what did Nick and Abi do to fight this? Because we can say we did our bit. It may not have been enough. It may not have worked, but we were not found wanting when the neo-Marxists and the new communists all came to tear down our civilization. Me and you were not found wanting.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's in a way, I think of this as, but I've always been a bit of an optimist in some ways. I see this as opportunity for people like you and me. I see this opportunity for free thinkers, for people on the right. Even though I think left and right on politics has been slightly blurred, you know what I mean? I think we both agree on that. But the idea that that we go back to the structure of the individual family unit, and looking after the next generation, looking after them and saying, go for it, be great, do great things, go and have families.
I think that's where we end. I don't think we can beat that last sentence. Let's be great. Let's raise our families to be. Let's give our children inspiration to achieve what we never could achieve.
Yes,
that's what we should be doing. So,
yeah,
Abi,
amen.
Where can people find you online?
People can find me online. I tell you what, I'd like to plug my Substack if possible. So that's abiroberts.substack.com.
I will put all these details in the description of this video. That'll be
brilliant, Nick. Yep. Thank you. Also, if you can put kathycrunt.com, which is my website for Kathy Crunt. BGBB TV News is on Facebook. I've got a new page on there. Yep. You can go to YouTube, Abi Roberts. Blimey, Telegram, Getter. Yep. Oh yeah, Getter's a big one because I've got a lot of followers on Getter.
We're both on Getter.
Yeah. We're both on Getter. I think that's pretty much Rumble. That's pretty much it.
Well, I'll get all the details off you, and I'll stick them all in the description so people don't have to search. They can just click the links.
That's wonderful, Nick. Thank you.
Abi, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, we will do. Cheers,
Abi.
Cheers, darling.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.